baptize any of the apostles, as is the standard Christian thing, but he does send out the apostles with anointing oil to heal the sick and cast out demons. Casting out demons in the ancient world usually meant things like epilepsy, treating things like epilepsy. And I don't know how much you know about early Christianity, but for the first few hundred years of AD, there were all sorts of different Christian groups. These are generally known under this collective term known as Gnosticism now. And one Christian group rose to prominence, the Catholic Church, and they seem to be against the anointing oil. And documents from the time period refer specifically to a problem between baptism versus anointing oil. And the Gnostics in their text would write, they go down in water without receiving anything. We have our anointing oil, and we receive initiation through the anointing oil. They refer to it for treating a variety of ailments, from crooked limbs to skin diseases, and then as well as it being a source of unfading bliss. And they refer to it as a plant of kindness and Indian leaves and stuff like that, which all seem to be pretty direct references to cannabis, especially the more mystical experiences from it. And this was all driven down underground and pushed out of the way, and they basically tried to destroy this, not just the Gnostic cults, but every other religion. This is what led to the Dark Ages. Every book, everything else that competed with Christianity was totally shut out of the pictures. And we had the Dark Ages for 1,200 years, and even during that time, herbal users, people that use herbal medicines and herbal sacraments like witches, were burned for doing so. And cannabis was considered one of the devil's main sacraments. But even at this time, there were secret cultures, Masonic groups, Rosicrucian groups, and other segments of society that continued the secret use of cannabis. And elements of that have made it down into the present day. So something's happening here with this plant. And it's been really rewarding for me to be having a part of my life and be able to be a spokesperson for it. And I tell you, if you feel like that, if you feel that calling in that, follow that, because you'll find happiness by pursuing that and taking control of the world. It's one thing to be a victim of circumstance, but you don't need to be a victim of circumstance. You're the star of your own movie, and you just need to stand up and stand up for what's right. Woo!
Like the seeds and the...
oh man, I don't know. Like there's every herb you already see. That's a classic one that everybody uses. There's not a distinct cannabis reference, but I'm referring to the specific cannabis references. There's these 5 references. The one in Exodus. There's one in Ezekiel where it comes in a caravan from a foreign land. There's one in Isaiah where God's angered because he says, "You have not brought any canna for me. Your sacrifices do not please me." And part of that problem was there was a lot of, through much of the history of the Hebrew kingdom was actually polytheistic. And at times, Jehovah actually had a wife, Asherah, and many of the other deities were worshipped right alongside Jehovah, as was the common polytheistic practice in the ancient world. And so the cult of Jehovah was often mythed because the sacraments and whatnot were going to these other religious deities and whatnot. And at the time of Jeremiah, this comes to a head. And Jeremiah says, your incense of Sheba does not please me. Your canna from a distant land, does not make me happy. And this is all because it turns out he's angered that the people of Israel are burning incense to the Queen of Heaven. And there's a huge lambastation of the people burning incense to the Queen of Heaven in Jeremiah 44. That's really interesting. It's almost like the first pot rally where the crowds, we're going to continue to burn our incense. And he's like, "Arr!" So it's a pretty fascinating story.
You mentioned soma, but I think soma is a fairly common word. Aldous Huxley wrote Brave New World. I think he used the word.
He used the word, yeah. Well, it's an ancient Vedic term, and Huxley just borrowed it.
Right, and there was a John Allegro who wrote The Magic Mushroom and the Cross.
Yeah. Well, he was expanding on Watson's theory that it was the fly agaric mushroom.
Right.
And this is incorrect. It's like,
how
easily...
can you distinguish? How do they know what the words...
Well, basically, it's described as a big green bushy plant in both the Avesta and the Avestas. But specifically with soma, there's the Sapataka Brahmana, which was written around 500 BC and is one of the last Vedic texts. And it says sana is the plant soma, which is made so by consecrations. And so sana is a Sanskrit term for cannabis, and it says through the consecration and ritual, they make it into soma.
Going back to religious quotes, a friend of mine said that in his studies he found that Ezekiel 34:29 was, in his
Is that the
opinion,
plan of renown? Or?
I will give you a plan of great
Yeah,
renown.
well, that may well be, but it's not like, I'm totally open to that, and I mention it in my book and stuff like that, but it's not as concrete as, say, the linguistics that are involved with cannabis. See, what Sula Bennett did is she traced the modern word cannabis back through history and showed that its connection that way to the ancient Hebrew term, and then also compared the Assyrian and Babylonian terms for cannabis, kanabu, which is very similar as well. The Assyrians and Babylonians were using it in an identical manner. They made anointing oils for it, and there's direct references that for the anointing oils used to open one's ear to God. So they were using it in the exact same manner as the Hebrews. But it's still, could well be a reference, and there's a possibility of that. But it's hard to make that claim without the linguistics there.
Are you currently writing any books with cannabis?
Yeah, I'm working on a book on cannabis and the occult movement. People like Aleister Crowley, Helena Blavatsky, the Templars, the Assassins in Islam, and groups like that, alchemy, Rosicrucians.
Berkeley's book.
Oh, I got a case in federal court as well. I probably should have mentioned. But this case is a case about spiritual use. And what we did is we wrote, me and a lawyer, a friend of mine, another activist, Kirk Tussaud, we wrote the health minister, and we asked for an exemption 56 for spiritual use of cannabis. Exemption 56 is what the medical marijuana is granted prior to the medical marijuana program here in Canada. And we thought we'd get turned down, but getting turned down opens it up to a judicial review of the health minister's decision in federal court, where we can argue all the charter issues regarding the freedom of religion. And so I got 3 professors that had read my books and knew me to write affidavits, saying that I was, correct in my historical review and that sincere in my beliefs. A professor of anthropology, Scott Littleton from California, professor of mythology, Professor Carl Ruck from Boston University, and professor of psychology from California, Professor Tom Roberts. And these are all well-known professors who've written books and are at the end of their careers and whatnot. And the ministry responded to our affidavits, saying that they, based on the Controlled Drugs and Regulations Act, they couldn't take this further. And they said that this was partly due to the public's unwillingness to do so, which is untrue, because all the major polls and everything like that show that the public's in fact on our side, not on the government side on this issue. And so we're going into court with that. And I'm also an expert witness in another court case in Ontario next month on April 14th. And in this case,